Hi, I'm Michael.
And I'm Jesse.
I'm Iwana.
And I'm Tori, and we're with the Latham Science Engagement Initiative. During our time at the University of Iowa, we have all been involved in undergraduate research. And while we've had many opportunities to present our research, we want to give a voice to the personal undergraduate research experience. 1 out of 3 undergraduates will be involved in research during their time at the University of Iowa. And there are just as many unique opportunities as there are interested and capable young minds. These are their stories.
I got involved in research because I wanted to better understand the science behind the discoveries I was learning about in my coursework as a biology major. I found my lab because I was volunteering at an event that was showing high schoolers around the biology department, and so by working at that event I got to see this lab as it was presented to the high school students, and I found it really interesting, and that outreach aspect of it also really appealed to me. So by getting involved in that lab, I've also been able to show my lab to high school students too, and communicate research to the public and to the community, and really enjoyed doing that.
I was already involved in the chamber music program, and Elizabeth Oakes is the person who runs that, and I really loved her teaching style, so I wanted to see what else she was doing. And when I found out that she was doing research regarding equity in music, I was really interested.
Learning on the job gives students the unique opportunity to learn under faculty and staff, and many students find themselves joining their labs in long-term research projects. Here is some of the work that they're doing.
What we wanted to figure out is if we attach another graph to it and then apply a transformation on some of the vertices of the graph, whether the Jacobian group of that graph stays the same.
Yeah, so we were trying to answer the question of if daytime bike lights made an impact on riders' comfortability, so cyclists' comfortability. And so we had 3 different groups. We had a control group that had no bike lights at all, and then we had 2 separate groups, our intervention groups. One group would have the bike for the first weekend, and one group would have the light for the second weekend. Mm-hmm. And so that way we could compare both to a total control group, and we could also control within the intervention group itself.
So our lab focuses on how bacteria interact with their environment and how they engage with other bacteria, how they communicate with them, how they alter their genes in order to best adapt to their different environments. My project in particular is looking at how the bacteria navigate within their environment, so how they choose to go from one location to another. Are they going to do this in a manner that is socially directed, so trying to see if teamwork does make the dream work, both in bacteria like it does in humans. And so what we're actually looking at is trying to understand how a molecule that the bacteria secrete to communicate with one another, how this directs where they're going within the environment.
Of course, getting your foot in the door is just the first step, but it's not always easy. A new lab means new skills, new colleagues, and most of all, new challenges.
I worked at a research lab like most of high school, so it was a pretty easy transition for me, though that isn't always the case. But each research mentor has their own specific quirks and the way that they do things, so I did have to adjust the way I did PCR and like those gels. Mm-hmm. But I had a very good research mentor, so I was very lucky in that aspect. And she knew about my schedule, and she was very flexible.
I guess I didn't really feel in my research group until I had broken a piece of glassware, and all of the people that were in the lab at the time were like, oh, now you're actually a part of this. You've been here for a while, you've broken something. That's the process, I guess, like my initiation.
And right now I'm doing stuff more related to bioinformatics, and I don't actually have to be physically in the lab to do it, which does help, but at the same time, it's hard to balance it with courses and work and other extracurricular activities.
It was slow at first. I had to get trained on chemical wet bench procedure. I had to get trained on all the machines I would be using. And that took like a good month and a half to get through all of that. I had to do like all the online stuff and run around getting everything signed by people. And after I was all ready to start working, I'm a physicist. I was doing chemistry research, so I worked under very close supervision of a graduate student for about another month or 2. And then they kind of let me start doing things on my own that they were sure I knew how to do and that I wouldn't break the instruments. So it was a very slow transition, I would say. A lot of hand-holding, a lot of going to meetings and just listening to what other people were doing rather than doing anything myself at first.
Did the government shutdown affect you guys at all?
Yes, for we had to put in we were set into a special status where only certain people could work, and then we were brought back into a temporary position where people could perform the work, but not everyone could come back. It got a little bit iffy. For 5 days, we were shut down.
It was such a gratifying feeling to overcome those roadblocks and eventually make our research our own. Projects become truly personal.
I had my advisor ask me, like, what do you want to do? And I was like, oh, I want to be like an activist, an advocate in the community. And she's like, so then why are you doing biochemistry? So then I ended up, I spent an entire semester just figuring out what I wanted to do. So I took a lot of human right and a pre-law class and some public health classes, and then that's where I really started to thrive, and I just noticed myself being super happy and I was excited to go to class. So then I ended up speaking to my research mentor, told him that I didn't want to continue in the biochemistry lab because I was no longer a biochemistry student, so my knowledge wasn't going to continue, and I also didn't want to take a spot from a biochemistry student. And at that time I also started interning at the Human Rights Center, which is an entity within the law school, and through that internship I met my next research mentor, which is her name is Amy Wiseman, and she mentioned that she was currently working on a project which was called Promoting Culturally Appropriate Care for New Iowans. Essentially it's looking at the mental health treatment of refugees in Iowa City and Eastern Iowa in general, and looking at how we can improve that, and it just seemed like a perfect fit.
How has it changed me? I think it's deepened my understanding of science and my appreciation for how much work goes into science, and how any contribution, any scientific contribution, has a lot of work behind it, behind the scenes you wouldn't necessarily know about. And I think just working on a scientific project has taught me a lot about perseverance and working toward long-term goals, as well as communicating about those goals and why they're important to everyone.
Now I'm in a place where it's more actual performance focused, which is keeping me more engaged. So I would say that finding the medium through which I best experience research was the biggest struggle for me.
There's a lot to learn and a lot of highly specific knowledge that you have to figure out. So when I was doing, for example, the statistical analyses, I had to do all of it through a coding language that I only halfway knew how to use or speak type program. I don't know. So that was really hard to learn on my own. And it was really intimidating, I think, before even starting the analysis section of my project, knowing how to even start doing that. So that's probably the hardest part about it, and also the thing that took the longest, but luckily I had professors that were really willing to put in a lot of extra time outside of class to kind of help me go above and beyond on learning that language that I needed to know, and then also doing the correct statistical tests on my data. And so even though it was a pretty big obstacle, the professors here were really, really helpful in helping me overcome them.
My research is more so geared toward giving labs another tool to validate their research. And so within the visual sciences world, my assay, hopefully, will be a way for labs to test whether or not a particular drug for gene therapy may or may not work. Which, if you think about the ramifications of gene therapy, you could potentially reverse damaging things that cause blindness, and that's a really big deal, especially for kids who want a good quality of life, or just for anybody who wants a quality of life. So if I can give labs a way to prove to the world that their drug works, that has a greater sense beyond just what we're doing.
We became increasingly invested in our research, and with that, our projects became a source of inspiration and insight into other parts of our lives.
And I am doing everything.
and I love it. I am the person, I take brains, I slice them up, I am the one who stains them, I get to look at them, I get to take pictures of them, I get to do everything. I love it so much. It is so much fun to really, I work on a really cool part of the brain because with a single stain, you can kind of just see it. So like I can hold up a little slide and be able to point to somebody what area of the brain I'm looking at because it's visible with that stain, and it's really, really cool. And it makes me very excited. So yeah, I have transitioned from kind of just doing a little bit of data analysis into really coming out on my own and being able to carry out a full experiment and a full analysis by myself. It has definitely impacted me. So starting research has been really life-changing. I didn't realize how much I would really enjoy it. And again, I said earlier, but it's my favorite part of my day every day. And it's amazing to be able to use kind of experiments in like a method to be able to understand the world around you. It makes me look at textbooks very differently because somebody had to figure out and do science to understand every bit of information, every sentence that is in a textbook. And it makes me kind of really proud to be a scientist because I one day might get to contribute to the learning of future scientists and future people, and that's awesome. And I really am starting to understand how people understand the world around us and how we learn things about the world, and that's a really cool experience for me.
So I came to Iowa with the plan to study speech and hearing, and I obviously still am, but I think a lot of sophomore year I was in this dilemma of do I want to stick with it, do I not? Right. So I joined the lab almost exactly a year ago. It was last January, and I thought at the time I was more interested in the speech side and becoming a speech pathologist, but I think that being in the lab has really cemented my interest in audiology and like the hearing science aspect of things. So it really has definitely changed my life and made me like more focused on my career.
Math class, you essentially just take in and absorb all this information that's being spat at you. And everything you learn in math classes, with an exception of a lot of like higher level kind of things, you almost never hear about like open questions or you're never really, you can't be taught what we haven't learned yet. So out on the frontier of math research, there's a lot of questions that we still don't have set answers for. And what you learn in a math course is just the set answers that we've found. What's important to note here is that essentially our system of math is only a couple hundred years old. So like we're learning, there's basically a huge frontier left. We haven't nearly exhausted everything because this system is new.
As undergraduates, our role in the research community is as unique as it is important. We get to partake in novel research while receiving close mentorship from graduate students and faculty across all departments. The scope of our research extends far beyond campus.
I think the best part was stemming from the opportunities that it gave me in addition, because I got to work with people at the NASA Jet Propulsion Laboratory via email. I was then able to coordinate setting up an internship to be out there and actually work for NASA, which is like a childhood dream that went from being a dream to a very sudden reality. And I was like, wow, this is actually happening. And I was blown away to actually see that come true. But it's just sort of opened up all of these doors that I can really kind of pick and choose which ones I want to go through. And I've got this sudden sort of buffet platter in front of me, and I've got so many options that I have to stop and think for a minute, what do I want to do?
I think when you kind of look, research like mine might not seem to have any practical applications. It's really the foundation of, everything that comes before that. The tip top of the pyramid that you see there is actual things, like drug treatments and whatnot. But the stuff like that wouldn't exist if labs like mine didn't exist, and I think that's a really cool way of putting things together in the big grand scheme of things there.
I think a big thing in terms of independence was just being able to read scientific literature, because when you become scientifically literate, more so, you don't need to ask as many questions because the answer is probably already out there. And so when you're able to actually look up, references and read them and actually understand what's going on, to at least to the extent that you need to, that involves a lot less emails to your PI or a lot less emails to anyone, or a lot fewer questions during meetings, which can be good, but it also can be bad because sometimes you think you understand something and you actually don't, and then you end up doing something incorrectly, and then it comes back to bite you later. But so I think as time has gone on, it's just been that I've required less pointing in terms of which way to go, although that's not necessarily true. I think there have been some moments very recently even where I was going kind of in circles and needed help getting out of that. But so that's kind of like the danger of autonomy. But I think as time has gone on, there's just been fewer questions that where I felt completely lost, as opposed to questions where I knew kind of where I should be looking for the answer. So I think it's just been that I kind of know where to look now.
The University of Iowa is one of 2 Research One institutions in the state. In the 2018 fiscal year alone, the University of Iowa received nearly $550 million in the form of over 2,000 research grants and contracts. It's no surprise that so many undergraduates get involved in research. Research has been an important part of our undergraduate careers, and we hope it becomes part of the lives of many more. Thanks for watching.